Hey y'all, I'm Carrie,
I'm Momo.
and this is Monstrous. This episode contains language and topics that may not be suitable for all listeners, and topics that may be triggering to some. Listener discretion is advised. All right, everybody, welcome back for another week. And we're going to take a minute to apologize for y'all not getting an episode last week, or I guess the week before, and then this one is late. As anyone that is on our Facebook or TikTok knows, we lost one of our 5 dogs, and that was difficult for all of us. Isabel was a big part of our family. We had her for a very long time, and so we took that very hard. Then last week, my youngest caught influenza A, and that was rough.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, he had spent most of the week fighting off 103-degree temperature. So it was a very long week. So this one is late. We apologize for that. We thank you for your understanding, all of that. And I think that's it. Actually, we have a video that I made of pictures of Isabel on our TikTok, and I believe it's on Facebook as well. If anyone wants to go see her pretty little face,
Rotten, she was rotten.
I know she was stubborn.
You think?
All right. So with all of that, we're going to get into today's episode. So you're going to get this one, plus your regular Monday episode that we had planned for this week. So we are going to dive today into one of the most persistent and controversial mysteries in the modern true crime world. It is a pattern of deaths that police have dismissed as accidents. But some investigators believe that it is, in fact, the work of a highly organized serial killer network.
What, they got a union now?
Yep.
Can't laugh, I'll get to coughing.
Mhm.
And on top of it, my mom's sick.
So, as y'all could tell by the name of today's episode, we are going to be discussing the Smiley Face Killers Theory.
I remember you talking about this one.
But before we dive into the details, if you love a deep dive analysis like this, please take a moment to rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening to us now. Your support helps us bring these types of controversial cases, as well as those that have been solved and unsolved, right to you every week. Also, we want to hear from you. So leave us those reviews, send us your emails, tell us all the things. So, are you ready?
I suppose.
Okay. So, the debate around the smiley face killer theory is intense. And if you have personal experience, theories, or information regarding the victims or their official rulings that we talk about today, send us your emails. Also, send us your opinions. You can do that on Facebook, on TikTok, email, comments, all the things. So, the night is cold. The air smells of cheap beer, exhaust fumes, and the deep, wet earth of a nearby riverbank. It's 2 a.m. in any college town across America. A young man, a student, perhaps an athlete, strong, vital, and alive, stumbles away from a downtown bar. He's alone. He's disoriented. He is, to put it simply, an easy mark. Then he vanishes. Weeks or months later, the river delivers him back. His death ruled an accident. The tragic consequence of youth and alcohol. A closed file. But what if that closure is a lie? What if a decades long string of drownings from New York to Minnesota are actually the work of an organized network of killers?
Cool.
What if the cause of hundreds of deaths isn't accidental at all, but instead a group that exploits the natural hazards of our cities, using the rivers as their final perfect accomplice? This is the mystery that has haunted dozens of families, frustrated local police, and challenged the very limits of forensic science for over 2 decades. This is the dark, intricate web woven around a simple, haunting circle. The official line is always the same: it's the last mile problem. An intoxicated young man, the cold, the water, a fatal chain of events. But when we examine the evidence, case after case, jurisdiction after jurisdiction, we find patterns that defy natural explanation. We find trauma, we find drugs, we find staging, and we find police departments utterly unwilling to look past their initial simple conclusion. This is not coincidence. This is a modus operandi. The story of the Smiley Face Killers begins in 1997, but the seeds of suspicion took root years later, planted by three determined men: retired NYPD detective Kevin Gannon and Anthony Durrett, and criminal justice professor Dr. Lee Gilbertson. They recognized a pattern that everyone else had dismissed as statistical noise and coincidental. The demographics was unnervingly specific: predominantly white, college aged, athletic, successful young men. They disappear late at night, often from highly populated yet controlled downtown areas, and their bodies are invariably recovered from a nearby river, creek, or a lake.
They
The,
went skinny dipping.
oh my goodness. The investigators looked at over 45 initial cases, and the similarities were impossible
Was
to
this all in the
ignore.
same area?
Everywhere from New York to Minnesota.
No, in this place.
Across multiple states. The investigators weren't just looking at the date and location. They were focusing on the point of failure, the specific moment their victim became vulnerable. To the investigators, this suggested a pattern of abduction by vehicle. The victims, according to them, are targeted on what is called the last mile walk home. This is when they're disoriented, they're quickly subdued, and then put into a van or a car, and they're never seen alive again. This explains why they vanish from public view so quickly, and why the bodies are often recovered in areas inaccessible to a disoriented walker, but perfect for a quick late night disposal by vehicle, such as under bridges or remote access roads. So let's look at the cornerstone cases that first define the pattern for these investigators. Patrick McNeill was a 21-year-old Fordham student. He disappeared after leaving a bar in Manhattan. Weeks later, his body was pulled from the East River. Police ruled it an accidental drowning, likely slipping on the pier and falling into the water. But the initial details were strange. Patrick's body had allegedly had signs of being bound, and there were allegations of burn.
Dang.
Furthermore, the decomposition and the presence of insect life were inconsistent with a body that had been in the cold East River water the entire time he was missing.
Uh-uh.
The investigators saw this as the earliest example of a staged disposal. The body wasn't found where the person died, it was put there. This was the first domino to fall, but the pattern truly became apparent when the investigators broadened their search geographically, focusing on a particular hotspot. For a small city, La Crosse, Wisconsin, this has been an unnerving statistic. Between 1997 and 2011, approximately 12 young men, students from UW La Crosse or Viterbo University, drowned in or near the Mississippi River.
Dang, nobody liked those colleges, apparently.
This cluster is geographically crucial. It is a crucial detail that is often cited. From this cluster comes the case of Luke Homan, a student who vanished in 2006. When his body was recovered after 5 days, he was found nude, and his clothes, they were found neatly folded on the riverbank only 50 yards away.
Dang.
For the investigators, this is an unmistakable sign of staging, not accidental falling. Because who gets undressed to stand next to the riverbank and then
Well, not
fall in?
me.
That doesn't make any sense. 12 deaths in a contained area, all fitting the exact same victim profile, strongly suggests to investigators a cell of killers was operating regionally. It's a very big coincidence to have 12 people who fit the exact same victim profile to die under very similar circumstances, and they all be accidental.
I don't think so.
Yeah, but it was the discovery of a non-accidental signature that gave the theory its controversial name. Near several of these recovery sites across the Midwest, the investigators found a piece of graffiti, a simple, round smiley face,
Oh, that ain't creepy at all.
right? For Gannon's team, the smiley face wasn't just a sign, it was a psychological element of the crime, a signature of power and taunt. It demonstrates the killer's complete confidence in the systematic failure of police to link the cases. The signature is not left at the time of death, but instead it is left there after the disposal, often days or weeks later, to ensure the authorities understand that they are being mocked. This element of taunting is a major red flag for trained behavioral analysis. To truly grasp the scope of Gannon and Durant's investigation, we have to understand the sheer volume of cases that they felt were being ignored. So, after Patrick McNeill in 1997, the disappearances began to accumulate, seemingly at random, across the Midwest and Northeast. Like I said, the investigators weren't just looking at the date and location, they were focusing on the point of failure, that specific moment their victim became a victim. So, we're talking about corridors. The initial cases followed major interstate lines, particularly along I 94, which connects places like Minneapolis, Minnesota, Madison, New Hampshire, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois, and even right here in Iowa, in Dubuque, along the Mississippi River, where Iowa borders up against Illinois.
I want to know that.
Yep,
Sorry.
it's okay. So
I'm more
there,
comfortable saying that way.
oh yeah, I know. Just move it. There, there are even victims from here in Iowa that are believed to be victims of the Smiley Face Killers.
Dang.
Hmm.
That boy gets around.
Right. So, to the police, this wasn't just random movement. It just so happened each of these young men who fit the same victim profile, who died in similar circumstances, were just all over the place. Just happened. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So, to the investigators, though, this suggested a pattern of access and escape, implying that the killers were mobile and not necessarily local to the city that they struck in. So let's consider the subtle similarities in the initial discovery scenes that first raised flags for this team. The bodies were often found near areas accessible only to vehicles at late hours. There was no public foot traffic. In many initial reports, families mentioned suspicious cars seen following the victims, a detail that the police often dismissed as anecdotal. Furthermore,
That's a funny word.
it's so random. Furthermore, many of the victims had their cell phones, keys, and wallets recovered with their bodies. I'm going to explain why this is weird, okay? Had the victims fallen in, like has been said, logic suggests they may have struggled to pull themselves out of the water,
Yeah, that's true.
which means
Even in their drunk stupor,
exactly, they're not just going to sink to the bottom. They're going to try to get out.
he's out there to lay back going, "Yeah, baby."
Yeah, they might just float away. You know what I mean?
but they're eventually gonna sober up because that water is usually cold.
Oh, yeah. Losing these items on the bank or in the immediate area during that entire process. So keys, cell phones, and wallets most likely would not have been found on their body.
They were found with those items?
Yes, those items were found in their pockets.
Well, whoever did it's a lousy criminal because you can take the money and cell phones, you can just take what, that little card thingy out
The SIM card, yeah.
and just buy a new SIM card and you got a
Right,
new phone.
right. But it's weird that they're like, "Oh, these are all accidents."
Accidents my patoot.
Right. If you've ever fallen into water,
You're gonna splash around and
exactly, those things are gonna come out of your pockets. At least one of those items are gonna be lost.
more likely your phone because it's just usually the heaviest.
Right,
It's gonna sink right to the bottom.
exactly. But all of that was found on them. That doesn't make any sense.
Either that they had some really tight pockets.
Yeah. Well, damn. So finding them and this they were found on their bodies weeks later. Like, they're not found right after they fall in. This is weeks of them being missing. Even if they
That
felt
don't make no sense.
right, because even if, okay, devil's advocate, they were accidents. This man falls into the water, everything manages to stay in his pockets. After weeks of being missing, just the current and the movement of the
Well, with the
water
well, this
alone,
how many years how long ago was this?
spanning all the way back to 1997.
Okay, 97 cell phones weren't really a thing then, because I didn't get my first cell phone till I think you were 5.
Right, they were around, but not everybody had them.
Yeah, you had the money to have them bad boys
Mhm.
because they were satellite phones, they ran
Right.
off satellites. It's
Mhm.
not like nowadays where God and everybody's got a
Right.
cell cell phone, but
Sorry.
some just don't make sense. It's
Exactly.
not registering in my little thick brain here.
It just after weeks, even just the current and the movement that the
Yeah, I
body
mean,
would go through, some those things in their pockets would eventually make their way out.
you
It's
would think.
and that's not even the strangest thing, okay? We're not even to the oddest part. Okay, so this all to many people who believe this theory is what's actually happening, all of this implies a quick, clean disposal rather than just some chaotic accident. And I'm sorry, I'm on the band that this is a real thing. I'm on that
Something's
wagon.
not something's not jiving in my brain.
Right, it's the whole thing, it just is weird. So this leads us back to the lacrosse cluster, a statistical anomaly that became ground zero for this theory. Think about the demographic. Lacrosse is a small city. For a dozen young male students to drown in a single short stretch of a river over a decade is statistically and highly improbable to be accidental death. How many accidental deaths happen in a small city like this? Not very many.
Not none that I know of.
When I was in high school and we lived in a very small town, you know that. We had I had 2 people in my school die the entire time I was there. One from an accidental drowning.
I remember that.
Yep, he flipped his car. He was drunk driving. Don't do that, guys. He flipped his car over the side of a bridge and he drowned because it landed in water, obviously. And then he was a year older than me. And then there was a girl a year younger than me. She was hit by a drunk driver leaving a party. So in our tiny town, that's it. To have 12 in 10 years,
Something's not kosher.
something's not right. So this obviously terrified the local community, but the local police concluded that the proximity of the bars to the river, combined with the extreme drinking culture of College Town, created a fatal nesting. which, okay, yeah, accidents happen, people get hurt, and unfortunately, people do die whenever they drink way too much.
People are stupid.
But personally, I think this specific local police force are banking too much on that. Something is definitely going on, in my opinion. So their solution was River Watch, which simply prevents people from going near the river, essentially validating the official theory that the environment is the culprit. Mama's just shaking her head. But investigators reject that. They see the concentrated pattern as proof of organizational structure. They argue that these killers operate in decentralized cells. One cell handles the La Crosse area, another handles the Pittsburgh, Ohio corridor, and so on. They share the same protocol, the victim profile, the GHB, the staging, and they communicate this successful MO via channels such as the dark web. The inconsistency of the smile face graffiti, sometimes it's drawn with horns, it's not always the same color. This is explained by investigators as the difference in the artists from separate cells, each putting their own territorial stamp on the operation. So the overall feel of it is the same, but each has some kind of tiny little difference. Yeah. So this fact is why the FBI dismisses it. A true serial killer signature is usually rigid and consistent, reflecting an unchanging psychological ritual, which that is true. But if this is a cell, like these three men believe it is, they would look similar, but they would have those small differences because it's not the same person every single time. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. My brain's going, "Huh?"
Because we all know that they can get it wrong. FBI can get it wrong. Regular police force gets it wrong.
Oh, yeah, because well, they're only human.
Exactly. So, my opinion, they're wrong. But to really look at this, we're going to delve deeper into the structural flaw that the investigators had identified. And when I say investigators, I mean the three men, the two retired NYPD detectives, and then the doctor. Just
Well, the doctor don't know squat about it.
he's a professor.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, so not that kind of doctor.
no. He just has a doctorate, so that's what his label is.
He's got a doctorate.
He's a criminal justice professor.
Ew.
So he has a doctorate. So the official position, as maintained by the FBI, rests on the assertion that a serial killer's signature must be consistent. But we know for a fact that is not always the case. They point to the fact that the alleged smiley faces are drawn in different colors, they're different sizes, they have different styles. Some have horns, some have halos, some have stars. The FBI argues that a single serial killer or often a small coordinated group would maintain uniformity in their taunt. The lack of uniformity here for them invalidates the signature entirely. So they're like, it's just a coincidence. They're just so because the smiley face is a very common form of graffiti.
Well, smiley face has been around since the '70s.
Right, and as graffiti, you see it everywhere. So, according to the FBI, this is just coincidence.
But is it?
Right. How many bodies do you find near a smiley face for it to not be a coincidence? So, however, the Gannon team counters this by asserting that the very inconsistency is the key. This, they believe, demonstrates the existence of multiple independent cells operating across vast geographic territories. They share the same protocol and they communicate this, like I said, through channels like the dark web, making the entire operation invisible to traditional police profiles.
Well, profiling is not an exact science.
No, and they use previous offenders and previous serial killers, and so on
But
to
and they're not all the same.
no, and they use all that. That's how they create their profiles. So maybe this is just something they've never found before, and that's why it doesn't fit. Mhm.
My brain's going like
I
this.
know.
Can you see the wheels turning?
Yep. So the struggle over the symbol's meaning is central to this. If the graffiti is random, then the theory collapses. But if it is a signature, the accident ruling must be overturned. And these cases become homicide investigation and the hunt for multiple killers begins.
Sounds like an episode of First 48.
Right. So with all of that, we also have to address the most recent of this tragedy. In 2021, the disappearance of Jelani Day, a Black graduate student at Illinois State University, who was found deceased in the Illinois River, gained massive national attention.
And that's all along the same corridor, isn't it?
I-94, yep. While the historical smiley face pattern focused almost exclusively on white men, Day's case shares the core MO of that pattern. A college student who vanished, and his body later recovered from a river with confusing circumstances.
And they're sure it's not just the college hazing gone bad.
It's possible. It could be that. It's possible. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of colleges that have had deaths because of hazing.
And a lot of colleges stop hazing.
Yep.
I don't even know if they still do it nowadays.
They
I
do,
They just
um,
don't get caught.
typically, yeah.
Cool.
And if they are caught, a lot of the colleges,
The
they'll put them on probation, and if it
Although
continues,
they lose their charter, don't
yep,
they?
they lose their charter, which means they are no longer a fraternity for the college. A lot of universities do that now.
Yeah, 'cause it got ugly there for a while.
Colleges get sued, families of
There
the kids who did the hazing get sued.
Yeah, and
It becomes very
most of the
messy.
time they're
It becomes very, very messy. This case highlights not only the persistence of the drowning pattern, but also the issue of racial disparities and how missing person cases are handled, adding a modern complex layer to the ongoing discussion of unexplained river death. This expansion of the victim profile, though tragic, is a critical data point for the investigator's opponent, who claimed the theory is simply evolving to encompass any suspicious drowning, regardless of the victim's profile, further proving its fundamental lack of structure. The theory's elasticity, though, they argue, makes it unfalsifiable. Basically, it's not the theory that's just grasping at everything, it's the killer's evolving.
that's kind of scary.
Right. So, however, the forensic evidence is where the debate transitions from circumstantial theory to direct challenge of established science. So, to understand this, we have to delve into the details of these anomalies. So, we're going to look at the cornerstone cases that provided physical evidence. William Hurley was a Boston resident, and he went missing after leaving a comedy show. His body was later recovered from the Charles River. The evidence here spoke to two things: assault and incapacitation. First, William had severe bruising and trauma concentrated in the recessed areas of his face, so under his eyes and the bridge of his nose. This type and location of injury strongly suggests a targeted beating before he entered the water.
Well, that's just rude.
But the most critical finding was chemical. Toxicology confirmed the presence of GHB in his system.
Oh, dang.
For those that do not know, GHB is a commonly used date rape drug. The investigators argue that this proves he was subdued in order to be abducted. Then we have Tommy Booth, whose death provided the most powerful argument for staging: the manipulation of a body after death. Tommy's body was recovered after 14 days, found lying down in a creek. But the autopsy revealed a critical discrepancy. Fixed lividity was on his back, not his front. So, for those that don't know, lividity is the settling of blood due to gravity, and it fixes several hours after death to the lowest point of the body. So, since his lividity was on his back, that means for several hours after death, he was lying on his back, but he was found face down. That means post mortem, he was moved and dumped face down inside that water. This is an absolute and 100% sign of staging and manipulation. You can't get around that. So, to clarify for our listeners, lividity or postmortem discoloration begins to show after about 30 minutes of death. This happens as the gravity pulls the blood to the lowest point of the body. So, if a person dies on their back, the pulling color shows on their back and it becomes thick, meaning that it does not move or shift. And this happens approximately somewhere between 8 to 12 hours after death. So, for at least 8 hours, Tommy Booth laid on his back. So, for him to be recovered face down with the blood fixed on his back, this proves his body was held for a significant amount of time and then deliberately flipped over face down before disposal. This detail, more than any other, rules out a simple accidental fall. Furthermore, the body was only mildly decomposed after 2 weeks and was found to be in full rigor mortis. So, rigor mortis typically goes away because you have rigor and then you come out of rigor, and that's natural. Typically, rigor dissipates within 72 hours. For him to be in full rigor after 14 days, his body would have been kept in a cold, controlled environment, such as a freezer or a storage unit, and had only recently been dumped. This entirely contradicts the official FBI timeline.
So they're holding these kids for weeks at a time.
Hmm.
Dang, poor
Yep.
dudes.
So the timeline problem is equally damning for the official theory. The mild decomposition of multiple bodies, Tommy Booth after 14 days, Dakota James after 40 days, and Paul Kachu after 95 days, is an absolute forensic sticking point. The investigators contend that the bodies were stored in a freezing environment, like I said, then dumped shortly before they were found. Another critical yet subtle piece of evidence supporting the staging theory comes from the sheer amount of dirt, clay, and small rocks found embedded in the noses and chins of some of the victims.
Oh,
The investigators believe this evidence points directly to the body being dragged along the riverbank or the ground before being thrown into the water, which is inconsistent with someone who simply fell.
dude.
Yep. So now, in addition to the GHB and lividity, some forensic experts have pointed to the diatom test. Diatoms are microscopic algae found in almost all water bodies. So anywhere you see water, you have diatom algae. So when a person is alive and breathing water in, these diatoms enter the lungs and they are then circulated through the bloodstream and to the internal organs. The presence of water specific diatoms in the internal organs is strong evidence of ante-mortem drowning. So, drowning while you're alive. No matter how much water you have in your lungs, you're going to find these diatoms. So, controversially, okay, if the body was thrown into the water after death, the diatoms would only be present in the lungs or outside the body, not circulating within the internal organs because the blood could not absorb them. For many of the bodies recovered, the diatom results are either not reported or the results fail to conclusively prove the victims were alive when they entered the water. This strongly supports the theory that these men were deceased or incapacitated before they were thrown into the water.
This is wrong.
Hmm. So now we're going to go back to our victim. So I mentioned Dakota James. His disappearance became the centerpiece of this investigation. After vanishing from Pittsburgh's downtown, his body was found 40 days later in the Ohio River. So again, we find the familiar pattern here: high blood alcohol content and the presence of GHB. But the critical evidence in his case came from the renowned forensic pathologist, Dr. Cyril Wachette, I believe that's how you say that, whom his family hired. Dr. Wachette found a clear, distinct ligature mark which either which was either a groove or impression located on the back of Dakota's neck. He stated that this was definitive proof of strangulation, not an accident. Dr. Wetch's fine. I don't I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm probably saying his name wrong. I'm sorry. Dr. Wetch's findings of the ligature mark was clear. He stated the blood pooling in the nail beds indicated a defensive struggle. This is, by every measure, evidence of a homicide. However, the DA's office countered that the mark was simply dried blood pooling from the nose and mouth that settled around the neck, and it had been preserved by the cold water. Mama's just shaking her head. She doesn't know what to say. So the presence of the GHB in both William Hurley and Dakota James is the smoking gun for the homicide theory. But the debate hinges on institutional protocol. Local medical examiner labs often have budget constraints. They run standard toxicology panels that test for common drugs. And GHB testing is expensive and is not a standard protocol. The investigators argue that the only reason GHB was found in Hurley and James is because their families specifically requested and paid for that specialized testing. They believe that the GHB was present in hundreds of these victims, but the evidence was just simply missed. This highlights a critical blind spot in police investigation: the inability to correlate evidence across jurisdictions due to budget limitations. Mhm. So, GHB is notoriously difficult to detect long term. I did not know this. Okay. GHB is naturally produced by the body in very small amounts, and it is eliminated rapidly. So there is no major effect within your body because it gets rid of it so fast. But when you're dosed with GHB, it appears in your body in very high amounts, causing this signal between your brain and your body to slow. And that is where those effects, such as slow breathing, not being able to stand, incoherent, and unconsciousness begin to show up. So basically, when someone is dosed with GHB without their knowledge, as it is in these cases, you're being enough to have an overdose. Isn't that insane? Like, I knew the effects of GHB, obviously. I mean, I watch enough crime shows to know. But to learn that essentially you're being overdosed whenever you're given GHB, that blew my mind.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Like, I knew, like, what it did to you, obviously,
which basically is an overdose, honey.
but I didn't realize that until, like, I dug into, um, how long it stays in the body and, like, all of that
Not
stuff.
very long.
Mm-mm. Nor did I know that our bodies naturally produce THC.
Yeah, that's why it would be considered an overdose.
Yep, I did not know that.
Yep.
That blew my mind. Okay, so this is why it is hard to detect it long term. So, in a living victim, GHB is typically only detectable in urine for up to 12 hours and in their blood for up to 8 hours after it has been consumed. So, when a body is recovered after days or weeks in the water, that water can accelerate the degradation and wash away the drug
Mhm.
completely. So, it is extremely hard to find GHB in a victim that is now deceased. So therefore, the fact that GHB was found at all in the system of James, who was missing for 40 days, is scientifically improbable under normal circumstances and strongly suggests that the drug was administered in massive quantities or that the body had been preserved shortly after he was killed. Because that's the only way to keep those things in the system because the body's not breaking down. Yeah. So the pattern, according to investigators, isn't always marked by a body. We're going to look at Joshua Goodman. In 2002, he was a student who vanished from a contained campus without a trace, suggesting an abduction by vehicle and a clean crime scene. The investigators believe this demonstrates the killer's success in some cases. Joshua was abducted by vehicle and his body was never recovered. And finally, one of the most famous vanishing acts in modern history is Brian Schaefer in 2006. Brian was a promising medical student at Ohio State University who disappeared after leaving a bar in Columbus, Ohio. This case is infamous because he was recorded by a security camera entering the bar with friends, but that same camera never saw him leave.
Somebody took his butt while he was still in there.
And the investigators argue that his disappearance is the ultimate successful abduction because he has never been found.
Oh, Lord.
They believe that he was targeted, subdued, and taken by a vehicle from an unnoticed back exit or service area that the security camera could not see. Then successfully disposed of in the river where his body was never recovered. This lack of a body is the killer's ultimate unaccessible victory. But before Brian, there was Todd.
I blamed acting.
I'm gonna say this guy's name wrong, I'm sorry. But before Brian, there was Todd Gibb,
Spell it.
Geib. Gibb, I believe that's how you say it.
Yeah, probably.
If I said it wrong, I apologize. This
Man, she can massacre some she's the smartest person one of the smartest people I know, but she can massacre some words, let me tell you.
my mouth just doesn't wanna work. Okay, I break sometimes, okay? Leave me alone. Okay, so he went missing just a year before in 2005. He went missing after leaving a party in Grand River, Michigan. His
Along that's the I-94 corridor, isn't it?
mm, I believe so, yeah.
Well, where we've been talking.
Yeah. So it's all along, like, just a straight line, basically.
They're taking him to
Hang
Canada to
on,
fight for the Canadians. I'm
hang on.
just kidding, I don't know.
I think so, let me pull this up. It's gonna be on, Facebook, guys, for you guys to see also, but I have a picture of it. Let me find it, here it is. That whole red line.
What highway is that? Or is
That's
it several different?
so this is all along I-94,
Okay.
and then you have highways here. So this whole area is where victims that they believe are smiley face killer victims, this red line is where they've all been found. And that's why they believe it's a network working in cells because of the sheer distance. That's a large area. Okay, so sorry guys. Anyway, so Todd's body was found floating vertically in the water 3 weeks after he went missing. This defies the laws of buoyancy and standard forensic pathology for a drowning victim. Yeah. So the investigators here argued that the vertical floating suggested the body had been weighed down or contained and had only been recently disposed of in order to be discovered. Another case that is often cited with this theory is Jason Offner from 2003. His body was recovered from the Chicago River after 17 days of being missing. Like many of the others, his family later alleged signs of rope burns or ligature marks around his neck and wrist, indicating he was restrained. A detail that was dismissed by the medical examiner as simple decomposition or aquatic damage. I would like to know what the fuck in the water can give you rope burn.
Nothing in the water, not unless you run up against something in the tide, but I can't see that happening.
Right. Like, let me know, please. So now for a weird, but more subtle yet statistically reoccurring detail in many of these cases. And that is the missing footwear. In a number of cases across different jurisdictions, victims' bodies were recovered with either one or both of their shoes missing. While local police often dismiss this, stating that shoes can be easily pulled off by currents or lost in the mud during a panic, which that is true. Okay. But on the other hand, this was another subtle initial intentional signature of staging. Removing a victim's shoe is a tactic often used by criminals to to both inhibit a disoriented person from running and to deliberately create a scene that suggests a chaotic accident or a confused fall rather than a clean abduction. But what could possibly be the most compelling evidence that these initial rulings are flawed comes from the case of Christopher Jenkins in Minneapolis. After Christopher was recovered from the Mississippi River after missing for 4 months, police officially ruled his death as a suicide, a conclusion that his family vehemently rejected.
Now, how the hell can it be? See, that don't make no sense. You're gone for 4 months. That's not a suicide. If it's a suicide, they're gonna find your butt pretty quick.
Right.
I
I don't know.
I can understand a week with being in the river.
Mhm.
I can understand a week. But 4 months? Come on. Get it together. Even an armchair detective like me can figure that out.
Oh, wait, you're about to get really mad. So, despite this official ruling, private investigators that were hired found out that his hands were tied behind his back with plastic zip ties.
Now, there is no way in hell you can commit suicide with your hands tied behind your back and zip tie. Ropes, yeah, I can understand. I can see it, but not zip ties because you have to tighten them suckers when you put them on,
Mhm.
and they don't loosen up
Yeah.
like a rope would. Come on.
Mhm. The medical examiner was then forced to overturn the ruling from suicide to homicide after this finding.
Well,
Yep. This demonstrates that even the most obvious signs of foul play can be missed or dismissed if the initial investigative assumption is active.
see, a lot of these people, they go in with blinders on.
Mhm.
They think college kids, you know, overstimulated, alcohol, drugs, whatever, uh, lack of sleep,
Mhm.
cramming for finals and shit, stress, depression, away from home possibly for the first time in their lives,
Yep.
you know, and they automatically rule it a suicide
Yep. Any good detective will tell you, you treat every single case like a homicide.
until you're proven otherwise.
Exactly. Because if you treat a homicide as a suicide from the very beginning, you have evidence that's gone forever.
That's it. And judges don't like that.
So the investigators here maintain that the sheer volume of these cases, each with one or more of these confounding forensic details, is proof of a larger pattern that is being intentionally ignored by authorities. So they don't think that these guys are just incompetent. They think they are intentionally ignoring these things.
But I'm wondering though too, you know, because it's such a large stretch of the United States that these bodies are being found.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if the different law enforcement agencies aren't talking to each other.
Oh no, definitely not. Because if they did, it would be an FBI case because it's cross jurisdictional. It's
I mean, you've got
multiple states.
body coming here, you got one coming here, and you got one coming here. Okay, Peter doesn't know what Paul's doing. Paul don't know what Mary's doing, and it's like, you know,
Right.
look, y'all talk to each other.
Mhm.
Y'all do the same thing for a living. One's not going to get any more credit than the other one.
Exactly.
But give these families some closures and go out and find these fools.
Right. And that's really what it comes down to is they're not talking, they're not communicating. So unless you look at the cases as a whole, like these men have, you don't see the connection because they're across several different states.
But they want to play the big man on campus, the jurisdictional wise,
Right.
and they don't share well.
Right.
Kind of like like children.
Mhm.
They don't share well.
Nope.
They have to be taught to share.
Right.
And somebody ain't doing a very good job.
Most of their egos are so big that they just
Thank you.
yep, that's what it comes down to. That was my next thing. The institutional wall is really the final obstacle in all of this.
Because they don't talk to each other.
Right. This structural issue is why the case of Darren Dion Van, who is a confirmed serial killer who often left his victims near bodies of water in Indiana, is so intrusive. The contrast shows what a solved serial killer case should look like, further highlighting the deep, unsolvable ambiguity of the smiley face cases. Police operate in silos. A drowning file is local. The financial incentive is to close the file as an accident. This systematic failure is the key. The ruling of accidental drowning is often a necessary conclusion for financially strapped local medical examiner offices. Running specialized GHB tests, requiring independent forensic reviews, and coordinating evidence across multiple states is a massive drain on resources.
And I understand that, I really do, I understand that. But hard is it to pick up a phone
Right.
or send an email?
Mhm. Especially in today's world, everything is digital.
Exactly.
So the system, in the end, core lesson of today, the system is structurally incentivized to choose the simplest, cheapest, and most justifiable explanation. And here is the most frustrating critical point. A ruling of accidental drowning means that the case is closed.
But it's not closed. These parents have no closure. They don't know why their child did it
Yep,
unless they get out and investigate and find out, well, was his kid suicidal? Was he depressed?
exactly.
Did his girlfriend just dump him for a football player? Whatever.
But because that's man hours, that's money, that's time.
It's their job.
I know. But something that,
See, that's like I watch. I'm a big fan of the first 48. I really
right.
have, and I have been since it came out 20 some years ago.
Hmm. I
They
used to watch it with
actually,
you when I was little.
yeah, they actually get out, even though it's cut to an hour. You know,
Right, right.
they get out and they do their job.
And don't get me wrong,
They've
some
got cases they haven't solved
there are
that
some
take years.
jurisdictions that do their jobs that way, but not all of them do. And a lot of it comes down to money, time, and resources.
I know it. It's just crazy.
Yep. So this jurisdictional wall precludes the family from getting their loved one's case classified as a cold case homicide, which would unlock state and federal funding for dedicated detectives and forensic reexaminations. Because if it's classified as a cold case, they get their own unit, their own detectives who only work those cold cases.
And it's sad it has to come to that.
But because it's rolled as accidental drowning, it's done. It's put on a shelf in a box, and that's it. No one else ever looks at it. So the file is simply closed and the victim is forgotten by the system. The largest systematic flaw Gannon's team identified is the failure of local police departments to consistently use the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program database, or VICAP. VICAP was designed to connect clues across jurisdictional boundaries to identify patterns like the one alleged by the Smiley Face
See, that's
investigators.
another thing too. These local law enforcement don't wanna get into a pissing match with the FBI.
Right. Because if it becomes a multi state or multi victim thing, FBI can claim jurisdiction.
Yeah, and they can go anywhere.
Hmm.
And it's just and it should really they should work together with one team
Yep.
for the greater good.
Exactly. You all have the same goal in the end. Why why fight about it?
Why get into a pissing match?
Right, exactly.
Y'all gonna get your credit for solving it anyway, because everybody has a hand in it, so everybody will get a piece of the glory.
Right.
But prove to these families that their children were murdered and find the guys who did it.
Right. And if it was an accident, prove that. Show them that. Don't just simply say it was.
When it may not have been,
Exactly.
you know?
The biggest problem is that local police are not mandated to enter accidental death files, even suspicious ones, into the VICAP system. They only they are only required to enter confirmed homicide.
I think it all should go into VICAP.
I think so too. I think everything because how many times has there been a serial killer caught and come to find out these deaths that were thought to be accidental weren't? And when you looked at it, compared it to the known victims, the MOs match. Everything should be required to go into VICAP. It's all digital anyway. Like, how hard is it to click a button? Upload.
Shoot, I can do it.
Right. Like, it's not hard. So the irony here is that the very act of ruling these deaths the very act of ruling these deaths as accidents prevents the creation of the national pattern necessary to officially link all of these cases. So in other words, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of investigative failure,
It's called laziness.
pretty much. The financial cost, the lack of mandate, and the institutional resistance to admit they have a multi-state serial killer on their hands creates the perfect barrier against the truth. The most dramatic conflict in this entire thing is the confrontation between Dr. Cyril Wachette and the Allegheny County DA's office over Dakota James's case. Dr. Wackett's finding of the ligature mark was clear. He stated the blood pooling in the nail beds indicated a defensive struggle. This is, by every measure, like I said before, evidence of a homicide. However, the DA's office countered that the mark was simply dried blood that had pooled from his mouth and nose, and the cold water had preserved it, and it was nothing more than that.
On his nail bed?
Because he had what was a ligature mark and on his nail. Both was blood from his mouth and nose.
Oh, the ligature mark around his neck.
Mhm.
I thought you said his wrist. Somebody strangled that boy.
But according to the DA, it's just blood. It had pooled, and the cold water preserved it.
No.
The cold water would have washed it away.
Thank you.
So the DA's final statement was the evidence, while compelling, was not sufficient enough to meet the legal burden of probable cause for homicide, let alone the standard for a conviction. It may not be, but that's why you look into it and find the
That's why
evidence for
they
that,
have homicide detectives.
right? In order to charge homicide, they needed a suspect, a weapon, or a verifiable crime scene. All of that evidence was missing in his case.
Don't that make it a little suspicious right there?
Right. The forensic finding, no matter how compelling, was still considered circumstantial in the eyes of the law, and they refused to overturn the ruling due to the lack of reasonable expectation of conviction. So they won't overrule it simply because they don't think they can convict anybody.
Have you tried? I would rather if I was a DA, I would rather take my suspect to court and lose and still giving it my all
Then sit and do absolutely
and then
nothing.
do absolutely nothing.
Yeah. The official response from the FBI and local police is unwavering. These are separate, tragic, alcohol fueled accidents. The official counterpart is statistically powerful. The FBI asserts that the overwhelming majority of these deaths are a direct result of alcohol related drowning. The core problem is what they call the last mile problem. Young men, they're impaired by alcohol and they make dangerous choices. The consequences of the fall are compounded by the environment and cold water shock. Even a strong, athletic man, upon falling into frigid river water, will experience an immediate involuntary hyperventilation response, causing immediate water inhalation and almost certain drowning within minutes. But again, we go back to the algae in the water that is not present in their internal organs, which means it never entered their bloodstream, aka they were dead when they were put in the water. Because even if you're already dead when you enter water, water still gets in your lungs.
Yeah, keep them.
Right. But your body doesn't absorb it.
No, it just kinda sits there.
But if you're alive, your body absorbs it. Yeah. This psychological response, sometimes referred to as hydrocursion, causes a sudden, massive anatomic nervous system reaction that can lead to cardiac arrest or immediate incapacitation, which provides a simple, natural explanation So the lack of struggle and the shift to drowning. Hypo- Hypothermia quickly sets in, causing severe disorientation and preventing self-rescue. Again, there would be evidence of that. But okay. So the cold in this theory, according to the FBI, is the killer, not a person. So why did it take you 40 days to find someone?
Because most time if they're missing for just a few days, somebody's gonna report it. So
And then
why
they're
aren't you out looking for these kids?
right. In 2008, the FBI's National Center for Analysis of Violent Crime, or NCAVC, released a public statement concluding that they have found no evidence of a single serial killer or a coordinated group. They emphasized that the graffiti was not consistently present and lacked any uniformity to be considered a signature, which is the institutional basis for their dismissal. Academics and criminologists launch an even stronger attack on the theory's methodology. The term is apophenia, which is the human tendency to perceive meaningful connections between things that are actually unrelated. The investigators are finding smiley face graffiti near the river. Statistically, they would find any form of graffiti near a river in any major city.
That is true.
Right. The name Smiley Face Killer itself is likely an act of apnophenia, possibly influenced by the earlier confirmed serial killer, Keith Hunter Jefferson, who was known as the Happy Face Killer and used a smiley face as his signature. According to some, the investigators are confusing the two completely unrelated patterns. Or we could have a copycat. Just saying, because that has happened.
Many times.
Just throwing it out there. The Center for Homicide Research found that hundreds of women and other demographics have drowned in similar unexplained circumstances, yet the investigators excluded them. This is viewed as sampling bias, not proof of a killer's specific target profile. Therefore, the highest volume of cases shows zero trauma. If there was a violent serial killer or gang, most bodies should show signs of fight or restraint, but they don't. But they had GHB in their systems. That would make them unable to fight.
That's true.
The ultimate truth of the smiley face killers remains submerged in the cold, dark waters of America's rivers. We have witnessed overwhelming evidence that challenges the notion of accident, ligature marks, fixed lividity, and GHB. Yet, we have also faced equally powerful counterarguments rooted in statistics, physics, and the simple, tragic reality of human error fueled by intoxication. This tragedy is not just the deaths themselves, but the agonizing, unresolvable divide between science, law, and the desperate need for closure. And that is our deep dive into the smiley face killers theory.
I mean, it's possible some of those kids could have just accidentally drowned,
Oh, yeah.
that they're not all but not all of them. Come on now. How many of them was total?
So, according to my research, there's at least 45 young men, with some of the sources that I've seen saying it could be hundreds that have went missing and were found in water, and all of their deaths have been ruled accidental drownings.
No, they're not all accidental, I'm sorry.
Yep. 45 is what, these 3 men have linked together. It's a lot, but we all know there have been serial killers who have reached those numbers and over that,
Oh, yeah.
so it's not impossible. Could the smiley face be a signature? Yes, it could. We've seen it before, but I don't think all of them are serial killer victims. I think some of them most likely are accidental drowning because it does happen.
Oh, yeah, more often than you think,
Right.
but not yeah,
Not to
not
this
all of them.
level. I think some died under very suspicious circumstances. I mean, I told you about a few of them. it does not appear that it was an accident in any kinda way. But I think there are some that they have connected just because of the smiley face, because they were found in water. Those simple things, I think, is what they use to connect them, and I think those ones are accidents. But over 100, the accidental drowning in 2
Yeah,
decades, that's a
that's
lot.
5 a year.
Yeah,
That's a lot of kids going missing.
and it's not like there's witnesses to the accidental drowning, and in most cases, there are. There are usually people who try to save them and they can't, things
If they
like
get
that.
pulled under by a riptide or whatever,
Mhm. But in this case, that's not they go missing,
and
and
their
they're
bodies
found
don't show up for
weeks
days,
to
weeks,
months.
months later.
That's
No,
odd.
that's not accidental.
Something's going on. Oh, and then some of them were found miles away from where they were last seen. That too. Forgot to mention that.
Now that could have been current take them away. I will give it that one.
But it depends on where's the current were they found up or down? I couldn't find that. I couldn't find if they were found, miles away upstream
Upstream or
or if it was
downstream.
downstream. I couldn't
See,
figure that out.
but I could see that happening though.
Because yeah, because eventually you're gonna
Come out somewhere.
right. I fully believe that some of them were definitely murdered.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So, guys, send us your thoughts. What do you think? Yep, let us know. Do you believe the theory is true? Are you completely against it? Or do you think some of them are accidents and some of them aren't? Send those to our Facebook. You can email those to us. Our email is in the description. As always, let us know. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe so that way you get your notifications, as well as our next one that's going to come out today. So that way you have that. And before we get off of here, we're going to talk about the other episode that you're going to be getting. So we're going to pivot to a case that redefined the meaning of a digital haunting. Imagine a casual 2-week fling that turned into a 4-year nightmare. One where a woman vanishes into thin air, yet her presence never truly leaves. For nearly 4 years, her family and friends were bombarded with a relentless stream of over 15,000 emails and 50,000 text messages. To the world, she was alive, angry, and hiding in the shadows. But in reality, she was a digital ghost. We're going to unravel a twisted web of arson, fake kidnappings, and 30 different fake identities, all orchestrated by a killer who spent 50 hours a week making sure their victim remained alive on a smartphone screen. It is one of the most elaborate cases of obsession and identity theft ever recorded. And it all came crashing down because of a single secret hidden inside a digital photo. So you won't want to miss this deep dive into the person behind the keyboard and the links they went to delete another human being's life. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of true crime's most frustrating cold case theories. And until next time, we hope you keep listening and remember to
Watch out for monsters.
and don't kill people. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.